Oh, really? At the year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Come out, yeah, illustrate things out.
I
just get up to like that. The sort of breakdown that just passes.
Yeah, this one comes really.
Roundabout and go to the end there and dump it.
Be in the office by 8, right? Well, we'll get underway if you want. So we've got a full table of people ready to go.
Gotta justify them coming over the hill.
Yeah, actually,
Oh, I'm sorry, it started, sorry.
so we're moving straight into our workshop. Item 1, although I think there are 2 parts of item 1, is 3 water strategy. We've got 60 minutes across the 2 presentations, and then also a lot of time set aside for questions and answers. I think Brent suggested that maybe we'll do the questions to start with, at least as we're going through each of those items, and see how that goes. We need to just go through the presentation and then the questions at the end. But I'll hand over to you to
Cool, thank you.
present your information to us.
I'll kick off and I'll hand over to the people who do all the work. I guess as Gavin alluded to, there's 2 parts to this. So the first hour is us talking about our world, which is the 3 waters strategy space. You may recall back in, I think it was November last year, we did our induction with the new council. There was an action for us to come back and talk a bit more in detail around the 3 water space. It's taken a bit of time to come back. We had a few little false starts to try and get on agendas, etc. But part of today is to sort of close out that action that we took. But also, I guess part of this is really we want to try and help you better understand the world that we work in. We often just see you in response to a project or a particular issue or whatever it might be. So today's all about sort of just giving you an understanding around the work the team does. So that's the first hour. As Gavin said, we'll take questions along the way because I suspect there'll be a few. But I am going to try and keep us I think there's real risk here that we could spend quite some time talking about this. So, but if I keep tapping my phone, that's just me checking the time. But quick introductions. Helen Beaumont here on the end, 3 Waters Strategy and Planning Manager. Kieran Cameron, Senior Network Engineer in our 3 Waters team. And Mark, who may be familiar to some of you, is helping us out with a whole lot of strategic work as well, because we need some extra horsepower, and he's got a whole lot of knowledge that we can use. So I'm going to hand over to Helen. I'll keep an eye on sort of the time, and obviously just the questions come as they go. The second agenda item, which Gavin alluded to, is around water demand management. That's another one that I think will also be very topical. If there's any questions that come up in the first part, we might just park those and pick them up in the next session. So, okay, thank you. Helen, over to you.
All right, thanks very much. Now we've said we're going to talk for an hour and listen for an hour. So we do encourage you to interrupt us, or there will be pauses through the presentations where you can ask questions or make observations. We may be able to answer some of those questions, and we may have to go away and find more information for others. So we'll just keep it going. And thanks, Brent, for looking after time for us. Now, we've called this 3 waters, but this first presentation, we are only going to look at the wastewater networks and the water supply networks. And we'll use the examples in the Whakatip Basin and over here in the Awatuka Basin. But we are doing stormwater network management plans. So they used to be called catchment management plans, but we want to distinguish them from what Otago Regional Council do and what we're doing in some other areas with our blue-green networks. These are only the stormwater network management plans that are being formed. And yes, you can rest assured that we are looking at both quantity of water, so how much water we can manage through our networks, and the quality, and we're aware of those discharges that you raised this morning to bring the bay and the light. So we'll be covering that and come back to you on those. So are we moving on?
Helen, has everyone got these available? I'm just conscious that screen might be a bit quite far away.
Yeah, you should have.
Everyone's got it? Cool. Yeah.
All available? All right. Okay, so just at a high level, in terms of the strategic context, we're working within a whole lot of documents that the Queenstown District Council has had for a long time. So the spatial plan is one of the key documents that guides what we do, but also the strategic framework. So these challenges and responses are drawn from those plans, and also the strategic asset management plan, for those of you who are familiar with that. So nobody here needs to be told that growth is one of the biggest challenges for us, and not just the ongoing growth, but the unexpected growth in the areas that we weren't planning for, so through fast track applications. So that is one of the biggest things for us. And that brings some big challenges in terms of peak demand. And we're unusual, so Queenstown's unusual in that sense, in terms of our networks. Most people are facing the challenge of renewals and aging networks, but for us, we're at the other end. So a bit more like places like Tauranga or Selwyn. We also have, like most councils, decades of sort of financial constraint, which have given us a bit of backlog that we need to do. So that's on top of the growth challenge. Again, nobody needs reminding of the relentless regulatory and legislative reform. So we've spent a lot of money in this district trying to catch up on water and water regulations and water quality and the compliance burden that goes with that. And we'll still be playing catch up on that. But the changes in regulation are ongoing. And of course, we've got the Reform of Resource Management Act underway at the moment, and the policy statements and national environmental standards that pertain to infrastructure we follow. So we need to keep on top of those. Another thing that's distinctive about Queenstown is it's a very geographically challenging environment to lay pipes and install infrastructure. So it's not like the big cities where I spent most of my last 10 years in Christchurch. It's really easy. Here it's quite difficult and much more expensive. So that is one of the challenges for you. And as pointed out this morning, it's an ecologically sensitive environment as well. So we have to.
Is there a distinction between Clutha and Queenstown? I mean, in terms of that geographical issue, because Wanaka's not that complex. I know it's got some interesting geology, but not impossible.
Well, we've got Wanaka, Hawea, Cardrona, so it's not just Wanaka.
It's not just Wanaka, but even Hawea is not
as well.
Not super complex. I would have thought in terms of geography. So I'm just trying to. Is there?
No,
I think it's Queenstown.
Queenstown's
It's harder.
harder, just because of
And
it.
there's rivers of
Long
lakes
skinny.
next the way, and there's all that stuff.
Right, climate change affects all of our infrastructure, obviously, and again, we're aware of that. We do have some infrastructure deficits, and we also have some information gaps, which there's a lot of work going into addressing at the moment, and ongoing resource constraints. This council always finds it difficult to find staff, and we've got a limited contractor and consultant base as well. So it's not like the main centres.
Alan, what do you mean by information gap? It's an information gap.
Where we don't have detailed information on all of our infrastructure, where it hasn't been so well documented in the past. Mostly it's the
What pipes are and
yeah,
lines are,
exactly
things
where
like
they
that.
are and what size they are.
Right.
Yeah. In terms of the responses, we want to maximise the use of existing infrastructure, as everybody does. So maximise what we've got and then stage for growth, so we don't overbuild. In terms of growth, we can look at growth as both an opportunity and a challenge, and it has been exploited as an opportunity here within Queenstown Lakes, and developer-led solutions can assist council quite a lot, and particularly in the future in the stormwater space, we can have some developer-led solutions that can help us retrofit to treat stormwater from older parts of town, which is a good thing. We want to improve our resilience to natural hazards and shock events. So every time we build back, we do try and build stronger and more robust, and look at how we do that. Water demand management, I'll come back to because we've got a second presentation on that. We have talked to you before about taking a dynamic approach, so staying agile and being able to respond to changes. So we can predict growth, but it'll never actually happen that way. it'll go faster in some area and slower in another, and then it'll pop up somewhere we didn't expect it. So we do need to stay agile and open to those changes. We've also talked to you previously about exploring both distributed networks and centralised systems, and that's for both water supply and wastewater. And we'll cover those in the presentations here today. And finally, look to smart systems and new technology in what we do. And with some of our smart meter trials, you'll be aware of there.
That's one question just before we move on.
Yeah.
So where there's the statement decades of financial constraints, what's the magnitude of that? So what's the gap between where we should be and where we are now in terms of catch up? And what's led to that decades? Because that's quite a strong statement. Is it just councillors that didn't want to approve a budget, or is it
all councils don't like to put their rates up?
Yeah.
And try and manage it as much as possible. And the phrase that always gets thrown around, of course, in water infrastructure is sweat your assets. So leave them on the ground longer and take the risk. And as long as that risk is manageable, that's fine. But it'll catch up in the end. Yeah. I don't think Queenstown is as bad as other parts of the country, and that's largely because our networks are quite young. But there are still things that we should have done 5 years ago, and we're catching up. Yeah. So we can come to some examples in the presentation.
Yeah, we talked about the sweating of assets in the past. That's always meant to be very uncomfortable because we're pushing the limits by definition. I think.
Well, it's all about risk, isn't it? So you might do it in where a pipe network is only servicing half a dozen houses. You won't do it where that pipe is servicing the hospital.
Okay.
So you manage your risk in doing
it. Yeah, it's a risk thing, but I mean, I think at one stage we were talking about sweating in relation to Project Shotover, I think, and then clearly we've gone beyond sweating there. So anyway.
Sorry, Helen, just on that previous slide, what does IoT mean?
Internet of Things.
Internet of Things.
Sorry, I did try and minimise the.
Yeah, it's a new one that I've come across. So.
Internet of Things.
Internet of Things.
Yeah. So you've got a smart meter at your gate, your water supply. In future, you'll be able to look at your phone so all connected up. So in terms of the strategies, so for the wastewater strategy as an example, there's a hierarchy. And today we want to talk to you about the high level network strategy. So that's 30 years plus, and it's on a catchment wide basis. So in terms of the spatial dimension of this, it's the whole catchment. So all of the Whakatapu Basin or all of the Upper Kruger Basin, including all of the small settlements within it. The next level down is the scheme plans, and those are developed for the next 10 to 20 years. So in Whakatapu, it's the Whakatapu Network Plan, which services Queenstown, across to Frankton, out to Arrowtown, down the southern corridor. And then we've got a smaller scheme out at Kingston, and in the future, potentially, a scheme up at Glenelg. And then the next level down from that are the program plans. So those are the prioritised, sequenced, costed list of projects that are going to be delivered in that 10-year period. And then, of course, the same in the Upper Kruger, and the same for water supply, and then future for stormwater.
How do we? I mean, there's two things that come to mind in terms of planning uncertainties, and is that it takes some time to develop a plan for a wastewater solution or whatever. And by that stage, we've also had urban intensification, we've also had, fast track consents, SHAs, whatever the things, the curveballs that have been thrown at us. And, in some cases, the solution no longer meets the need that, and I mean, it's interesting that we're now at a stage, both through urban intensification and through fast track, where we don't even have maximum densities prescribed for certain areas. So, I mean, how do we even plan for an area where we don't know what the outcome's going to be or the density is going to be?
Yeah, so the next slide probably helps a little bit in terms of the building blocks of that planning. But yes, there is a challenge in terms of staying agile in the face of change. But in terms of the building blocks, the most fundamental thing we have is the network model. So we have hydraulic models of our network. So we know what the flow is possible in the pipe, what the pressures are going to be at the boundary of the supply, for example, how much reservoir capacity we've got. So those hydraulic models are the basis, and we have those completed for all our major networks. Not in such good shape for all of the minor ones, but they will describe the current state of those networks, how they are operating, and where there any issues are.
Simon, I should add that that's a sort of got to that point relatively recently in our sort of history. Quite a big investment when we set up the strategy infrastructure planning team and the strategic asset management team to really focus on it. The asset management team in particular done a whole lot of work around that, hydraulic modelling, connections and things, was giving us much better information than we had previously.
So we can make better informed decisions around, you know, whether there's enough capacity. In the past, we seem to sort of going, well, we think there's enough capacity in that thing, and then run into problems.
So, I mean,
Whereas-
in the past, and lots of business cases that considered parts of the network, so we're in much better shape. So, big investment in time in people and resources around that. So, we're in much better shape around that. The other comment I'd make is I think historically, many councils have been just in time around their infrastructure. I think sometimes we've been just behind the time, given the growth that we've seen, and we need to get more agile. And both the asset management, the strategic asset management work, all that tells us much more information and this sort of work that Alan and the team is leading gives us a much better way of looking forward and predicting where some of these things might be going to happen and how we plan forward. And I think it's some of it's about resilience and being able to adapt. But having a strategy which outlines this, back with that much better information than we had previously, it's a much better position for those sorts of conversations.
We do need to make assumptions, though. To your point, we use all the zoned areas or what can be structural plans, spatial plans to see if there's going to be growth. There's going to not growth. A lot of our planning is on the basis of supporting that. But to your point, you know, some of those things might happen quicker or slower, but also then you have others that pop up that weren't in those areas. So I guess the work that these guys cover off allows us to understand if that's something we can support to being in an agile way, or whether that's something completely out of where we even plan to have any infrastructure. And then we work with that.
Yeah, but take an example like Ladies Mile, for instance, is you now got a minimum dense,
Yeah, you've
you're
got
right.
minimum
Minimum
densities,
but
no
not maximum, sorry. So that you don't know whether you're planning for 2,500 or 4,000 properties there effectively, or you know, in fact, some of the numbers we're hearing are probably even higher than that now. So yeah, I mean, how do you even? And a genuine question, because it's like we now know you've got to meet a certain amount, but not, you know, the other end is open ended almost.
So that's one place where the models are really helpful. So the models will identify how things are today, but the next thing we put in are the growth scenarios, and we can put in the growth scenarios for Ladies Mile. So the planners have done some really good work in terms of Ladies Mile, in terms of what
Realisable capacity.
what the yields are likely to be, particularly given what Simplicity are proposing in the high density areas, and then what's possible in the medium density areas.
I mean, that's a good example too, is Simplicity have blown out of the water our original design assumptions around the master plan.
Yeah, so the structure plan looked at about just under 2,500 DUEs. When the panel came in and approved the district plan, you're quite right, there were no maximum density provisions put in that chapter for the plan. However, there are other planning controls. So we have a good idea of what the sort of maximum yields are.
Yes, yeah.
One of the good things for water supply, though, for example, is one low density residential house. It's probably got about the same demand as 4 high density residential units because
of irrigation.
How many people live there?
because of irrigation, but yes, and also how many people live in and the patterns of use. So we can. It's not just multiplying the dwelling units. Yeah, so you can change your multipliers.
But I would also think that the assumption that the developer wants to completely maximise rather than minimise should be something that we always think about, you know, because they will, which is exactly what simplicity is.
That was the fight against, and Ladies Island, and we're going down a rabbit hole, but that was actually that many of the landowners there didn't want to do high density development because they don't want to capitalise that level of cost. They just want to subdivide sections and sell them off, which reduces their lower efficiency of land use, which is why they've driven but you know, you're right, the simplicity's gone the other way, and which defies the logic that we started out with anyway, we're sort of
That's okay. So we've got a service plan that was looking at 2018. And we're now updating that for probable yields of 4,500 across Lady Smile. And the maximum probable looks like about 6,000. So we can model that and look at that. But yeah.
Makes our traffic assumptions extraordinary.
Oh yeah, no, anyway. Traffic's not as easy as the water.
Just think about process. You've got these models. When something changes, do we have something in place in terms of how staff must react when a new fast track comes on board and you have to rerun the model and elevate any risks as they occur? I'm just thinking, what are our processes? Are they sort of in someone's head, and or do we actually have something?
Well, I think that there's two ways of it. So some of the fast tracks come in and they're in areas where we're known and we're already working on infrastructure, so we can respond to them based on stats information we have. Those fast tracks that pop up that are completely out of any area that we're currently servicing, then I guess we just have to respond with what information we have, i.e. there is no infrastructure in the vicinity. There was nothing planned, there's nothing in a long-term plan that will address that, so that we have to work with that particular person around to know there's nothing we have planned here. If you want to do something, then I'll talk to you about it. It applies not just for water, wastewater supply, but also applies in the transport spaces.
I just wonder when a bombshell comes from out of the blue that's not in line with our existing plans, what's our process for going, and what do we need to be thinking about? What are the issues? What are the risks? And how are we addressing that? Like a system, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
If we don't have one, that's fine.
No, we do. We I guess we as a council have to respond to these. Obviously, with our infrastructure head on, we obviously contribute to the council's response, and we provide a response based on whether there is something that we have planned in a long-term plan and therefore it makes sense, or we have a team and Helen's involved in this. We're responding to them, to each of these fast tracks, to say whether we have infrastructure that is able to be provided or supporting their fast track request.
And then you would look at the risk
Correct, that's
register
right.
and does it trigger?
It's a pretty structured process that we have to follow.
Okay.
It's run out of the planning and development team, so Dave Wallace's place. So we contribute the infrastructure part of it, and that gets fed in with all the other parts of council. So that's the process we contribute to it.
Almost by definition, the fast tracks are outside of zoned areas, outside serviceable areas. They provide for extra demand, and we're responding to that, saying, particularly to the wastewater areas, that we have no capacity, or we've got no capacity to their own. So we're also seeing developers doing their own thing, i.e. things like their own wastewater treatment plants to service some of the areas, which may feed into the overall strategy, but also are concerning from a serviceability long-term point of view. But fast tracks are a particular problem for us right now, because we haven't planned for the infrastructure, we haven't developed infrastructure, there'll be costs associated with that and implications on the entire network.
It's just a case of making sure we have a plan to deliver where we don't have something.
So no, we don't develop.
Or to acknowledge that we don't have it and to.
It's usually that if we do, then we.
It's just that we don't see it at the governance level. I'm just wondering what exists at the moment.
I think it's probably also worth noting that a number of the developers putting fast tracks usually are having conversations with us before, so they get an indication around whether we do or don't have anything around there. So typically their fast track is either submitting their own wastewater supply solution, if they know that there's nothing there. So we respond on that. So that's typically how it works at the moment. We've got a number of the bigger ones actually are in areas where we already have zoned land, and so RCL is one, Simplicity is another one. These are ones that we're fully aware of. Lots of long conversations with these guys, ones that pop up. So obviously we just provide the appropriate response. But it all goes through a very well-oiled process.
Thank you.
So in the meantime, should we carry on?
Yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, we'll carry on. We'll move, I think we'll move on to, move away from the high level stuff and move on to the wastewater network. Oh, yeah, that one there.
One of the cases. I mean, it's just not like.
You on the arrow?
Yeah.
So you didn't want to talk any more to your building blocks, right?
No, we can finish with the building blocks. Some of that's covered in the strategic responses.
I think it's just worth noting while Mark gets his slide up, we're, as Helen alluded to before, we're going to cover off as an example the Whakatipu wastewater side today. We obviously have an equivalent for the Upper Clutha, but just from a time constraints perspective, we're just going to give you a bit of an example around the Whakatipu side. Similarly, we've got Kieran's going to talk to the from a water supply perspective, the Wanaka side. So we have the equivalents. We're just not going to cover it all today. Just in case you're wondering there's something missing, that's why.
You stole the first slide.
I'm sorry. I'll try and fill in some time.
We've got it working. So we'll keep moving. Whakatipu wastewater, and same for water supply in the basin as well. Obviously, as we've already said, we're basing this on a number of pieces of existing information or information that's been generated through the earlier stages of this process. So we're looking at spatial plans. We're looking at the 21 version of the spatial plan, but also keeping in touch with the team around the next generation of the spatial plan that's coming. Out of that and the demand projections, we've done a system performance assessment using the model. So we've looked at in current performance and future performance in kind of 5 to 10 year chunks going forward. So we know what falls over when as you add more and more, as you add the growth in, or changing level of service.
We've got the four things.
We run the model to know where it falls over so that we can right time the investment. Yeah. But, we've looked at, we've brought in the information deliberations and everything around the southern corridor, Tapawai, and Te Putahi Ladies Mile as well, in terms of what those plans now look like. They've obviously, especially the southern corridor was relatively recent, so we've brought in that. We're looking at the fast track applications as where they come into the network. Brent's already talked about the bits that are a little bit outside of the network and may or may not come into the actual planning from a council point of view initially. We're pulling in renewals where we can. That the strategic asset management team are furiously working on a new renewals model to help better inform this and identify where there's opportunity to align a capital works project with a capital works growth project with a major renewal, and we're starting to pull those together. And things like we've got in here, things like where we might need fluoridation in the future, where that gets mandated to council, those kind of things. So there's a number of pieces of information we've pulled in to pull this all together. And then, so just before we get into the actual actual program that's kind of coming together slowly, we've used the May 25 growth projections as the basis of the modelling work that's been done. We've made an assumption that there's no material changes to wastewater treatment standards in the near future. No changes to the fundamental level of service delivered to the connection, so wastewater or water supply. And at this point, the program you'll see hasn't been rebalanced to other activities. So we might have an area where, for example, where water supply is accelerating a bit ahead of wastewater, but through the next steps of the process, we'll try and match those up. So we're not, leveraging more growth under water supply in an area that wastewater can deliver. So we're a bit more balanced. The financial and resource constraints haven't been applied as such at this point. It's a bit of a carryover from the last LTP, but until we get into the new process with the CCO, that will get rebalanced for that process. And then there's a short-term preferred pathway of a centralised network to shot over. And then in the long term, we're looking at adaptive pathways to figure out whether decentralised might work. So,
Let's ask a question around the growth projections. When we talk about, for example, the Ladies Mile and the number of dwellings, how do you then extrapolate that out into the number of people that are actually going to live in those dwellings? And if you have done that, has there been any, like I look at Shot of a Country, I live near Shot of a Country, and I walk the dog first thing in the morning, and I see how many cars and how many people are living there. And I wonder whether it's ever been an assessment done around what was actually consented and how many people they thought would live there versus how many people actually live there. And I always remember the Cocoa Ridge developers coming to see me because they wanted to do 150 houses in Cocoa Ridge, and they had a traffic engineer's report that said there would only be 1.8 cars per household. And I just laughed at them, and I said, you need to come for a walk with me with the dog in the morning around Shot of a Country, and you'll see how many cars are outside some of these houses. So I just wonder whether that level of work, you know, in terms of assessing number of houses, but actually assessing number of people, because, you know, with the prices for renting in this town, the number of people that end up getting squished into places and using the services and using the transport network is more than I think anyone ever anticipates.
yeah, so that is on our radar when we're looking at this. And as we talked about earlier with Ladies Mile, if you go, if it's really high density and much smaller, you know, household units in those high density areas, we're debating what that should be going forward in terms of the number of people. The model as it is at the moment, though, is it's calibrated to, it doesn't necessarily pick up the right amount of people, but it is calibrated to the number of households and how much wastewater they generate. So it's calibrated to that low density style living in that area, and we're having to make changes to that calibration around some assumptions for moving to very high density, because it's quite different for this district to go to the high density.
High number of residential flats and all that sort of stuff now because of the imperative too.
Can I pick up your point? Because that was probably, I think, more of a transport question, I think, from.
Well, no, I mean, the number of people, the number of cars, the number of toilets being flushed, isn't it the same thing?
Well, while we're sitting here, so Three Waters sort of, we obviously have in my team as well, we have a transport fund. So we have constant, you know, modelling conversations around, you know, with the NZTA, that's the state highway running through there, right? There are upgrades planned, all sorts of modelling happening. And we have all the developers, Simplicity and the others along there, you know, also working with the NZTA, et cetera, around how those will contribute. But I guess what we're trying to work out is how's a network work. It's not just, you know, a singular developer. And obviously we've got, you know, some fast tracks a bit further down the road, which are wanting to put in, you know, 1,100 lots. There's another one popped up that's putting another 350 down, or so Northern Perry Way. So those all, we're trying to understand all those because they all have an impact on our network, and that one road, and we drove through it this morning, was backed up all the way along there.
Yeah.
So, and these developments haven't happened yet, right? So just, I won't go on about it, but we're doing a lot of work in that space too.
So that would be an interesting thing to even have a look at, the development that Kirk Gibbons is doing on 5 Mile, which of those very small units, actually how many people are actually living there versus number of bedrooms.
So we did do a couple of cross
That's
checks.
how many are empty because of the Airbnb thing and all that. Yeah.
So there are a couple of cross checks that we do just on the growth numbers. Of course, we have census numbers as well. So, for example, Southern Corridor is 2.95 per household from the census, whereas the district average is 2.4. And I think that reflects those flats that are in a lot of those households down there. But we also, in terms of our model, we calibrate our models with actual numbers coming through the pump stations. So we've got bulk flow meters. So we know what the flows are from those pump stations. We know what catchment it serves, and we can back up those flows and check them. Yeah. So we monitor growth and calibrate our models to ensure that they keep up and you know, are as accurate as possible.
But just follow up on Stephen's question. So when for each of those residential sections in Shot of Country, their DCs would be based on standard dwelling, which is 3 people per household. So all we would have been able to charge was based on standard water use, the water supply and water disposal. The 3 people it happened. There'll be virtually no houses down there with 3. And I think that's what. So how do we now? Volumetric charging, we'll deal with that, but it doesn't help with sizing the network, and
because I think in Dunedin, because of the number of boarding house type things, they actually do it based on the number of bedrooms or the number of toilets or something instead. So because they acknowledge that difference, but I mean, if someone builds a residential flat, they will pay an additional DC or part DC for the flat. But if they've got a 6-bedroom house and you've got 12 people living there, you're only paying the equivalent of 3 people, which doesn't make sense yet. And we've had that up in Fernhill and stuff, where we have purpose-built properties that are designed to have 6 double bedrooms, and it just doesn't. Yeah.
So funding for that is obviously council's looking at that. I think probably what Helen's saying is trying to calibrate that with what the new normal is and how that's changing. We are seeing the simplicity around the debates around the ladies' mile, where the existing developers are upset about the proposed new density because that's not part of what they knew and loved and delivered. We're seeing quite a change. So I think it is, I suppose what Tina's saying is that reflecting on that and changing the models to try and keep pace with that becomes critical in terms of that future design. And I think as you need to keep Karen, maybe work through that, how we're going to try and cope with some of that might be a bit clearer.
Just conscious of my ability to timekeep here is slipping.
We'll skip through this slide quite quickly. I'm not going to read this out. The centralised, decentralised thing has been debated a few times recently, and there's pros and cons to both. At the moment, we're said essentially in the short term.
We might try to deal with this a little bit more than just skipping it, because this is a central question for people. So I may just take
I suppose, but we will be looking at this, and as we work through this process, we haven't looked at it in any real detail at this point, beyond what's been done through the Shotover project. We'll pick that work up, wind it into the kind of longer term thinking.
I guess my only question is we're going to be running processes for the investigation of alternative options to discharge the Kawerau. This information may be key to inform in those discussions. So will it be ready in time?
So we're certainly in backgrounds for those conversations as well. So
what's the time frame for completion of the decentralisation case and looking at?
our current plan is because we've looked at it a few times, is to push through to Shotover and wastewater. So from the southern corridor, etc.
I think if we go to the next slide, it does cover it.
The next slide is it.
Yeah. But in terms of feeding some useful information about decentralisation options, which would then impact the amount of how do we inform these discussions with this piece? Can we bring it forward so that it can do that, or can't we?
So there's a few things floating around in the mix here, though. I mean, firstly, we've already got the investment at Shotover wastewater treatment plant, which is seeing us through to the mid-2040s, mid to late 2040s anyway. So we want to use that while we've already invested in it. So then I guess the conversation is in, well, what happens beyond that? There's a sub-question as well, if we're looking at, for me, we're looking at decentralising treatment plants. There's a sub-question there, well, what do we do with the treated effluent from that decentralised plant? Does that decentralise, or does that go to our existing way of disposing of the treated effluent? Do we pump it still to where we've got the consented discharge or not, or do we have to come up with some other way? Is there land-based alternatives that are decentralised, or would it still need to go into a water source somewhere, either in the same location as now or another location somewhere? So that's a whole lot of other questions in there that I guess you're working on. For the longer term.
Also, to that point, given that we've got a certain amount of capacity and the infrastructure there that we don't want to stranded asset there, we probably want to use it. I don't think to go out that far, but in the meantime, we still need to know whether we're signaling to the developers down the southern corridor or whether we are heading towards a decentralised model, because potentially we'll use that capacity to service on this side of the bridge now. And we do need to have an understanding of that as soon as possible, because it will inform where we're going.
We
Maybe you wanted to talk to the slides, because I think some of this is actually covered.
Yeah.
I think if we go through the presentation on these 2 points and get back that, because everyone's agreeing.
Yeah.
But it's about how we do that. But the Shotover is, as you've got on the slide, expected to be the primary treatment plant at the moment. So I think maybe spend some time going through these slides, because these are significant issues.
So we touched on already, I suppose there's potential drivers for decentralizing later on, or opportunities to decentralize later on. There's a number of things, a developer-led proposal potentially to start the decentralization process potentially. A lot of it, say, depends on probably highly dependent on the discharge methodology of what's available in each of those locations. So we'll be leaning quite heavily on current work that's underway at Shotover and what final solution there to then understand what other solutions there might be elsewhere, if that makes sense. It's a little bit both sides.
Around this what I'm saying, because you can run it either way. Like, do we
It depends on what the solution is there and how much capacity they can generate.
solution there might depend on
Yeah, so it's
whether we can
so it's an initiative process we're going to have to go through with the team running that
It
project.
makes the octopus wobble.
Yeah.
So how likely is it? I mean, to me, it almost looks like decentralisation is going to be driven more by the developers, right? So they bought the land, they want to get on, they want to develop it, and it's going to take us years to go through planning, consenting, and construction of trunk sewers and things. But presumably, that's where the key pressure is going to be. Because even if there was significant pressure from the government for us to service some of these outlying fast tracks, it would take years to get there.
This is not a problem with the, I mean, we just, we're focused on servicing the areas that are zoned and developed. And now that we're being thrown these other things, I mean, we can't, and we shouldn't be forced into accepting a solution that isn't, we should be deciding to decentralise, not be forced into it by somebody else. We should be deciding to how we respond to those resource management issues, not being forced to. And to end up with half a dozen, and I can't think of anything worse than ending up with half a dozen developer-driven wastewater schemes throughout the district that we have to take over and operate. I mean, I honestly cannot think of anything worse. But, just think of what, Ridgeburn, taking over one at Ridgeburn and operating it would just be an absolute disaster.
So there are significant risks around
As well as significant risk. So,
and there are arguments for and against it, but the operational cost of having multiple wastewater treatment plants all over the place. And possibly the worst example there is Clutha District, which has a huge number of very small treatment plants through very small communities, and it's a nightmare from a cost point of view, from a compliance point of view. So
they've got 12 over 17,000 people or something, not even 17,000 people, and they're all non-compliant.
Really, we are facing fast tracks and processes that are driven by those fast track applications. It's having a strategy in it that allows us to consider that, and we would like to consolidate that. But and all the developers will go, we will build it, we will maintain it, we will operate, we'll have a body corporate to fund that until he fails, and there are significant long-term.
And there's an enormous amount of pressure on us now because of what they did it.
We also know that tracking all into one location is also very costly and puts medicine in one spot. So
We've got lots of ongoing conversations. Just trying to balance that. Where's that kind of sweet spot to help us as we grow? Sorry.
Well, just a quick question. Do we have any development agreements in the background with any of these developers to eventually help them up to the tech level? Does that happen? When they go ahead, Homestead Bay?
I mean, like a sort of temporary solution.
They've come up with their on-site solution that's consented, but do we enter into agreements? Is there anything in the background that we should be aware of?
so if Homestead Bay are proposing to do their own treatment plant and dispose of it, that would be their own system. We've raised concerns about that. No decisions around investing that in council, although 10 years out, 15 years out, we may see that push. But we're not connecting that up to the network, as I understand. That's the sort of various, although we are trying to have that negotiation discussion with them around a centralised network. But again, It's going to take some time if we do that.
But their consent does make some allowance for some future connection to the council services, doesn't it? Who knows?
There's neither or option.
As long as those agreements can't be signed in the background, we'll do something without it coming to this table. I think that's my question.
I think I just want to go back to your point around, a lot of these developers using that fast track to their advantage, and therefore they're going, how do I get my development quickly? And that's what it's there for, right? And though that's kind of putting a lot of pressure on us, and that's where some of these decentralised options are popping up. And I understand why the developers are driving for that, because they can kind of take us out of the equation. But then they sort of talk to us around, you guys can come in. That's when we get particularly interested. And of course, we still have an interest in this community, to make sure the right things go in. And to Brendan's point before, we don't really want a whole lot of bad solutions. So we're having lots of ongoing conversations, but I guess getting back to Mark's presentation, our current thinking, planning, all the options analysis we've done around here has currently got us pushing to shot over on the long-term side currently.
I think obviously the issues, we understand the issues of disposal to land and the challenges, but you take Homestead Bay or something and they go, we're going to trio and then we're going to dispose of it in this paddock over here, it's all hunky-dory, and then suddenly it doesn't work. And then their only option is to discharge directly to the lake. It's even worse than the situation we ended up in. It's just a disaster. So anyway, the point is that, and I've made this point dozens of times, is that in my view, this is old-fashioned resource management, and it's completely falling apart. In my view, that we are being able to go. We're managing land in order to, and infrastructure in the right way, and then ending up with this. It just is. It's the worst case outcome, and the reason the whole system was invented was to avoid that sort of stuff. So certainly we understand that challenge, but
do you think there's a middle ground where if developers are going to do their own thing on site, that this council staff have some input to what does better look like? Is that a role that staff see that they had? I know it's normally regional council, most of that consenting at that sort of stuff.
Sort of, talked about that a bit, and I had wondered whether council from an infrastructure, long-term sensibility should take a far more active role in the consenting process for wastewater treatment and disposal because of those very reasons. And I say that also on the basis that most of the land-based disposal methods around storm and other things have failed to meet the design objectives once they've been in place. People tend to be over-optimistic about that, and I think there is a real significant risk, and if these systems fail, the regulators likely to want a council to step in, and there's that huge potential liability for city there. But they're all moving at such pace, and the fast-track consenting process seems to allow consents for granted, knowing that there are infrastructure deficits, and it's a real problem for us. I think the benefit of what we're doing now at the moment, though, is a much better understanding of our networks, our limits, where we're trying to go, and so we're much stronger position than we have been for quite some time. But it doesn't help in terms of dealing with these various applications, because the Morven Ferry one, they suggested they take the Arrowtown wastewater and plug that up. And we go, well, if that was the case, we're not sure how they're going to discharge that to land and all the rest of its associated. So it isn't really. And I agree with I think in terms of the planning process, these sorts of things have upended that. And instead of wastewater has always been the constraining variable in my view around most of these developments. You can see this water mostly from public in the lake. Transport networks just get more and more contested. That's what's happening. So it's a real issue. So I think
did you see that developers' comments about his transport issues the other day in the paper? He's basically said, people will just have to go at different times of the day. This was his answer to the transport.
Around, I think it'd be really good investment to better resource our responses to these fast tracks around wastewater setups, if that's an option.
Actually, I don't know that we're asked for input into that. It's a sort of separate process. It's a question whether we do take more of an interest, but it is, we are running flat out to provide responses to these fast tracks now in terms of one of these, and we go, we have no ability to service fast track, that's someone else.
If we resource that appropriately, it would be, I think it would be a good investment. That would mean more staff, but it would mean a better outcome in the long run, potentially.
I'm just conscious of time.
Yes.
We're at that point. We do all these fast tracks come in, right? I spend hours every week talking to these developers. So whether there's a fast track in the mix or not, trying to work out what is good for us, what would enable us to have a good outcome for us. So a lot of these things we are trying to elbow our way into these conversations to make sure that, we don't inherit something that ultimately isn't good for us. Now, does that mean we'll get all the outcomes we want? I certainly hope so. We're actively involved in all of these conversations.
We'll quickly move through, there are some quite good slides we need to get to.
Yeah, 71 more slides that you can
Good to see that.
So next
There's a lot to get through.
10 seconds left.
We kind of outlined the process and the thinking we've kind of done today on this, and there's a fair bit more to do. We acknowledge that, and as I said, we've got to put kind of financial constraints in and resource constraints and everything else. So what this has shown us, though, so far, is that there's actually very little in the way of problems that we didn't already understand. Okay, so what it shows is that the current long-term plan will actually deliver what you need in terms of infrastructure capacity over time. It's starting pretty close now in terms of capacity. The LTP delivers, get ahead, and once you're ahead, it's easy to stay there. So what you'll see on this slide is kind of the key, and this is mostly around large capital kind of growth projects or major level of service projects. There's a number of things not included in this, like renewals and the kind of cyclical planning and that kind of thing. So, major capital works, and also some major investigations that that have been highlighted through the work today, and even some of the information gaps that we talked about earlier on. So we've got one arm at the moment trying to close those gaps, and the other trying to plan the capital stuff going forward. It's roughly in year of the major spend of when that project is due. So it's not necessarily when we're starting it or finishing it, but kind of somewhere in the middle. And there's a number of things in there. The new projects are based around Arthur's Point. There wasn't much in Arthur's Point for the last long-term plan. We've identified water and wastewater issues, potential issues in there with growth. Developers have currently been kind of stopped in Arthur's Point, and these couple of projects in the next couple of years will get them away again. Anything else was about there?
It's just worth noting that there's some of those investigations that are in the orange boxes you can see there. They will result in capital works projects that come out, but we haven't got enough information, or we haven't explored all of the options, so we don't know exactly what we want to put in place in timetable. So that's again an iterative process. So we have investigations and projects will spin out, and there'll be an example of Frankton which comes up, which is a good one to look at.
Just quickly ask the question out to Naughty being back on the list. Used to be remiss of me not to. Obviously that dropped off the last long-term plan.
Long-term plan, but not the 30-year strategy. Right. So it's creeping back into that time frame again.
What will have changed since the last decisions not to spend any money or invest?
Yeah, there's a bit of interest up there, and there's a developer who's interested in opportunities of working with council. So I think it's well worth looking at. And we also want to get a good understanding of where Otago Regional Council are sitting in terms of the septic tanks up there and the performance of those. So we're looking at what's going on up there, and we're thinking we should have another.
The developer led.
Possibly, yes.
I know this. I think we should clarify. This was always in the plan to look at the back end of this kind of term, but it's not. There's no extra addition. But I think you could look at that project as being due diligence. Is there an environmental degradation from the current setup? Does it need something else?
Have a look at the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, since then we've had all the work with the OIC, all of the risks starting to come into play, which will mean less growth.
It would be good to update on the E3 survey work that they did obviously 6 years ago. They did a 2 or 3 baseline monitoring, so that would be a good one.
That's when especially is with the head of the lake work.
Most of these things, if not all of them, will transfer to the CCO.
So make the comment, the last G27.
Yes.
Let's keep moving.
So we'll just give you go to the Sprankton example. It's a bit of a complex kind of diagram to throw up. The purple, I'm struggling to see this on the screen, sorry. Hope you can see it a bit better on yours. The purple is the current setup, along with the dotted, those dashed lines. And then eventually when developer-driven project to upgrade Remarkables Park. And once Remarkables Park gets upgraded, that takes a more direct route to treatment plant. And those dotted lines essentially get recommissioned or reused. So decommissioned or reused. So the small Carlisle Place pump station can effectively be decommissioned at that point and gravity down to Remarks Park. So that's been a plan for a very long time. Obviously, with the Southern Corridor coming in, at some point, we've got some capacity now. With the Hanley Farm upgrade has just been finished, we've got some capacity now to get that through to the treatment plant for the Southern Corridor. Then it's a decision down the track in that medium term. At the moment, we're indicating a second pipeline in here, but it could, if the decentralized wastewater treatment plant approach is kind of the path forward, then essentially that wouldn't have to happen. There could be a treatment plant in the Southern Corridor.
So just on the decommissioning component, how do you factor in the redundancy component there? Because obviously, are you better off leaving it there and just going, we can use it if the other one fails, or
the Southern Corridor pipeline?
Well,
the
the Remarkables Park one I was thinking of, but I'm just the principle.
It might actually get used for the new pump station.
Yeah.
A good chunk of it. I don't. So there's a number of things.
So you might relocate it, sort of, so to speak. I suppose just trying to think about, those redundancy things. Obviously, we don't want to get a position where we're completely reliant on one thing that could fail.
Yeah. So redundancies are something that's being debated at every step of the way through this process.
Move on.
Yes, we all know CBD to Shotto.
Move on.
Yep.
Getting rid of time. Yeah. I think it's a diagram of what we're planning and what we need to do.
It's really good to have all this information. I'm conscious there's lots of slides, but it's move through as fast as you need to.
Okay, and then say the medium term, so 30 to 37. You'll see it's starting to thin out, and it's actually more a factor of the fact that the short term has so much stuff in it to try and start actually servicing all the new growth corridors fairly swiftly. I don't think we need to talk too much to this one, apart from what you will also see through this time is not on this plan at the moment, is that the renewals for QLDC start to creep up pretty rapidly through that period. Your network that started to was built in the 60s, 70s will start to need renewal. Like I mentioned, there'll be a big bow wave of that coming. And then I think this is pretty typical again across most councils in New Zealand, is that the long term, there isn't much in the long term for council planning wise.
You say there's a lot happening.
Yeah.
There's
there's a lot of smoothing to be done yet, so things will push out into this area. And as we know more, obviously, you're more into the unknowns by the time you get out that far.
It's been pretty good at predicting demands will drop, rates increases or whether it'll drop. I think we can assume that it will keep going, but we just don't know what it is yet.
And then just a quick slide on what we know beyond that growth period is also going to trigger at some point towards somewhere between that 30-year horizon and a maximum probable sort of kind of scenario. We know what else will be triggered in terms of needing extra capacity. And then risks and opportunities, I think we've talked to most of these already, especially on the fast track. What happens if a discharge consent isn't granted? Or if we have a developer agreement, it falls over, but we still potentially need the infrastructure. So that's all things that are written into those agreements, and also the planning in terms of having some flexible funding if it became fully QLDC funded. Anything else anyone want to talk about there?
Trying to push it on you.
Yeah.
Just really quickly on the energy generation and the biomass and solids, is that an active work stream anyone's looking at right now?
It's in the future.
In the future.
It's in the future. So we're doing a bit of catch-up planning.
Yeah.
It would be great if we were looking at that as well at the moment, but we don't have the capacity. But yes, certainly on our radar, and we know it's necessary.
Okay, so some simple next steps, working towards the equivalent of an LTP for next year for Three Waters. Get all this mapped out, and we'll start scoping high-level projects. Cost estimation is the next big thing, is to recheck all those costs that were generated for previously through either Dyne or through the last LTP. And then we've already been talking within P&I around what we've got here, and then with yourselves, and then we also with strategic planning, etc. And then starting to do the cross activity balancing, bring in the funding constraints and that kind of thing. So I think that is me.
Can we, Kevin, I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah.
Are you okay, and how I'm going to make a bold statement here? Can we reduce the water demand managed one? To
Absolutely.
get care in 15 minutes?
Yeah.
So no longer overall. Is that okay with yourself if we do that? So condense the second item to 45 minutes and extend this one 15 to that care and finish. Is that okay? We're going to stick to our time a bit better than we have. Okay, that's not a friction on you. This is always going to be something that invokes sort of questions. So that was the intent. It's just yeah. So Kieran, I'll give you 15 minutes.
Yeah. And
then how we can condense the water demand management to 45.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. That's okay with you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, morning all. I'm going to talk to the water supply network strategy for Upper Clutha. I'll try and run through it fairly promptly. It follows very similar suit to the wastewater, so a lot of the structure and the processes that we've gone through are very similar. So yeah, for Upper Clutha, the main development areas identified in the spatial plan were South Wanaka and Wanaka CBD through to the three parks and the south of Hawaii as well. So yeah, we've got our network strategy, which will be our 30-year overarching vision, and then below that we'll sit the scheme plans for 10 to 30 years and program plans, and they'll be broken down into Wanaka, Hawaii, Waget. So yeah, this is a bit of an overview of the network strategy. So yeah, as I mentioned, the process is very similar to what Mark has described already, with systems performance assessments, needs assessments, which were based on prioritization framework and condition assessment, looking into the level of service, identifying where there might be current or future issues with complying with the level of service. And we've also used this information to prioritize work scopes and created a timeline in the same way that Mark had demonstrated for wastewater. So going into some of the issues identified for Upper Clutha, so water storage requirements, particularly for Wanaka and Lake Hawea, low high pressure issues across the network when you're looking in like 20, 30 years time, and all that planned development comes to fruition. Resilience, so particularly in Hawaii, you've got the reservoir on the west side of the Earth Dam. So from a resilience perspective, that's not an ideal scenario. And then reducing the chances of single point failures, for example, at peak point intake. And yeah, we've also got the potential requirement to service small townships such as Makarora, Blendu, if any development goes on there. So the main projects that were identified, so yeah, looking at water treatment investment, we've already implemented UV treatment, but there's pre-UV filtration going through the tender process at the moment. And in, I think, around 5 years' time, there's money in LTP for fluoride. And yeah, projects looking at Wanaka interconnecting the reservoirs, which I'll go on to talk a bit more about next in the next slide or two. And Hawaii, as I mentioned, yeah, additional source. So yeah, looking into new source on the east side of the township. And yeah, additional reservoir as well there. Cadrona water take permit, Lugget increasing the storage capacity, which is planned. At the moment, we've got a temporary tank farm there, and yeah, bringing the third bore online. And yeah, bringing those small townships, potential to bring those small townships into QLDC on infrastructure in the future.
Just a couple of quick questions. I'll be quick as I can.
Yeah.
So you're looking at a new intake over near the copper dam at the Hawaii, so behind the cemetery, and storage.
Yeah, potentially. So I'll go jump forward a couple of slides. So,
But then you're also looking at one over near the campground, additional intake over near the campground. Is that right?
no, that's not correct. We're at the moment we're doing some investigation works to the east of the township, like near Muir Road.
Yeah.
And then there would be, yeah, looking at if those investigations are positive, then we'd be looking at reservoir storage in that area. We've still not decided on a way forward for Hawaii, so everything's kind of still on the table. So
just thinking of that, though, you could potentially put some bores in the Coffer Dam Reserve to draw out, but then you did need a reservoir higher up somewhere there. Would you need to acquire land?
yeah, there you would need to require land for that scenario.
Back to your slides.
Oh, sorry, just a very quick question, mostly for anyone watching. Fluoride, our approach is still to only progress fluoridation if mandated, correct?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so this slide is around the twin intake for interlinked reservoirs. So some of the work has commenced already, but we've got it broken down into stages here. So from a resilience perspective, rather than just solely relying on the Beacon Point intake, looking to develop the western intake with a western or southwest reservoir around Hawthornden, and over time updating the network to interlink those two reservoirs.
Does that still, and you've got all the bits marked on there, but does it still require a new main across town like Anderson Road and stuff that was
already in?
Yeah.
Anderson Road's got an upgrade. While ago, golf course roads been upgraded. There's bits of it in.
Thought there was still a major upgrade from the top end of Anderson Road to do with the new reservoir.
Yeah, there's a couple mentioned here. So stages 3 and 4, Mount Aspiring Road to West Meadows Drive, and then on towards Catriona Valley Road. And yeah, it should be noted that the sequence of these stages could change. Like if, for example, if land was secured sooner, then maybe it would make sense to look at developing the reservoir.
The South Wanaka structure plan, which is just being initiated now, so you're thinking this is integrated into that thinking around. So I mean, the land acquisition being key to that is signalling where you want to through that process.
Yeah, that is a real opportunity. And for stormwater management down there as well. And there's quite a lot of low-lying land.
Totally.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, this slide is just around. So some work is taking place already to look into potential locations for Huffenden Reservoir. So looking at topography and elevation. Yeah, I'll skip through
I
that.
think some of those are actually on my auntie's land. Just
Oh,
you know,
Well, that's handy.
She also does the rest.
end of Studham Road. Debbie Studham, or Debbie French, yes, and I'm actually her co-trustee on the trust that owns on the land around there. So, FYI.
I think it's just a clearing interest.
Price just went up.
Yeah.
Joking.
Just keep moving.
Okay, and yeah, this slide is around some of the options for Hawea, and the most preferred option at this point would be having an eastern intake and reservoir close to the intake, and then upgrading the trunk mains towards the south of Hawea, because yeah, obviously to avoid any unnecessary services going across either the dam or needs service bridge further south of the dam. Also, I've been looking into options in the south. So the bottom left there, number 3, is considering that option, but then the land is lower lying in that area, so it would be needing to pump up to the township. And then option 4 there is looking at expanding Scott's Beach, the current bore field, and developing a reservoir there, but it's a bit restricted with space, and also tapping into the existing reservoir might have some limitations there. So decentralization of water sources. This is a bit more, well, a lot more straightforward, I would say, than decentralizing wastewater treatment. The current model is around decentralization, and yeah, especially when you look at like twin intake here in Wanaka. I'll not run through the pros and cons of each. It's very much aligned with wastewater pros and cons. And yeah, in the background, we're always looking into new and emerging technologies, how we can integrate that into our network. So increased monitoring, sensors, using AI, things like having a better idea of what our network's doing, being able to reduce the pressure in the system during peak times to put less stress on our network and help the longevity of the network, that kind of thing. Climate resilient is what we've spoken about. Diversified supply is not quite as much of an issue here. We've got a lot of good sources, water around, but yeah, the resilient piece is more critical to us with potential for earthquakes in the area, pressure management I kind of talked to, and then ensuring we're keeping our finger on the pulse with materials, pipe materials, when we're looking at renewals. So yeah, more robust materials that will be used and developed in the future, so that will hopefully take the pressure off our asset management and renewals program, and improvement in pump technology and performance. So yeah, smaller footprint, increased capacity within a smaller area will help us for our planning going forward. And
Just a question, we haven't mentioned Lindavia anywhere here, and some of the options include lake intakes rather than groundwater takes. I'm not sure whether the groundwater's got an issue with Lindavia anyway, given that the ball field's close to the lake, but metering, issues with clogging, is there anything that we've got around dealing with Lindavia? Where are we at with that? Do we have
The pre-UV filtration should dramatically reduce it. I don't know if they quantified exactly what that will be.
Yeah, the pre-UV filtration will dramatically reduce it. And depending on the experience with that, there's an option of putting smaller screens in as well. So at the moment, I think they're going with the 10 micron screens, which will get most of it out. And if that's not good enough, then we can go to a second set of smaller screens as well.
So we're testing that with groundwater at the moment.
No, that's going in for our lake intakes. We're out to tender.
Oh, okay.
So pre-UV filtration is going in on all of our lake intakes.
Okay, great. So that will check perfect. That's helpful.
I was conscious of time. Trying to do a better job at managing time's time. Is there any last questions for Kieran before we throw to the next item, which is the order of the minor managers?
And this is a quick question about the growth assumptions on page 28. The growth assumptions there are 2% admittedly for the Shotover Basin per annum. And in fact, we haven't grown at that rate since 1994. Our growth rate has been 4.5%. And it seems like I'm probably splitting hairs between 2% and 4.5%. But in fact, the doubling takes place at 2% over a period of 36 years, but at 4.5%, it's 16 years. So we shorten everything up by 20 years. So I'm a little concerned where those 2% came from. And I'm not pointing fingers at you because I realized that previous councils and Infometrics and Statsense had always tamped down our actual growth rate so that it forms a narrative that we're not growing as fast as we think we are. And that keeps costs low and that keeps projected rates increases low. Where does the 2% come from? And what would this look like at an actual 4.5% growth rate? And that's the latter half of that question is not something you can answer right now. It's just something to think about because I'd like to know an actual case, which some might see as a worst case.
Yeah. I'll jump in if you want. So what we did with the system performance assessment in all the hydraulic models is we actually also looked at a maximum probable development. So we know kind of that maximum state in terms of what's zoned now and known fast tracks, etc., etc. So that's also in the model, so we know what issues that would generate, and we can work back from that. So as you say, timing is very different depending on 2%, 4% or whatever you choose. The timing of when that happens is different, but with the kind of adaptive, flexible kind of approach we're trying to put here is that we'll try and keep it to flow rates or number of dwellings connected to trigger a pathway, and you have to change the timing of the project, yes, in an LTP if something is much faster than done. But essentially what was put into the models was the adopted growth projections at the start. But we recognise that even locally, when we're looking at this level of infrastructure, a developer gets ahead and that catchment accelerates faster than the others. That the growth projections are very much a long run.
I realize I'm being very crude because I'm just talking about district wide.
But yeah,
this feeds into Stephen's comment of we can pretend 2%, but when he walks out there, he sees lots and lots of cars, and I see lots and lots of people. And I see
there are new growth projections underway. So the updated growth projections will be developed by the policy and growth team, and then they will be fed back into our models so that we can test the network again with those new growth projections. But as Mark says, knowing that we need to know where it's happening.
A sensitivity analysis would be very helpful.
Yes.
5, 4.5, 3, some kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
So
Running those updates quickly, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that we can make adjustments quickly.
Practice adapters, we'll talk about before around, how we adapt and adjust, which is something we're really trying to build into how we work. So we're not rigid on 2% we agreed 5 years ago and can't therefore adjust. We're trying to be more adaptive to any new numbers that come in and growth stuff that we get, how do we quickly respond?
Don't get me wrong, but I think the other comment is that we are in a much better position to understand what those implications are into the future. We can do our modelling's better, our understanding's better, so we can go, we reach limits at these sort of points. So it is more adaptive, but I think historically we've underestimated the growth rates consistently almost every 10-year plan. So being adaptive to that and recognising that fast-paced growth sounds like that. Yeah.
Well, and I think our growth team have talked to Stats New Zealand too about running updated models for us. So there's a bit of work being done.
Water demand
All right.
management.
Water demand management. Is anyone?
We okay to
any
carry
break?
on? Yeah.
Right.
For 45.
It's the same team, like we guys working together, not but
All right. So water demand management. So this is managing demand for potable water from council supplies. So that's what our focus is here. And it's not just about water conservation messages in the summer. All right. So it's a much bigger program of work. And water demand management has been sitting in our long-term plan for a number of years. So it's not a new thing. But what we're doing is putting together a program level business case for how we roll out water demand management in the future. And the first year, of course, within council, and then recommendations for subsequent years as part of the new work CCO. So there's a couple of aspects of it for that. So what we want to do today is update you on where that program business case is. And you've probably read through most of the slides here, so I'll skip through them pretty quickly, but just confirm the key points. And we're going to run through 5 questions, so we can have some natural pauses if there are questions to understand what we're doing here. So those 5 key questions: why do it at all? And then a critical one: do we need to implement both metering and volumetric charging, or can we just make do with metering? How do we get the best out of the assets that we've got before we need to build new assets? How does council and the CCO lead by example? And then how do we manage that transition to the new more services CCO, which desperately needs a decent name. But okay, so the first part is why demand management, and the answer is that we are profligate users of water. Okay, and it's not just about visitors. So visitors do contribute, and they make our summer peaks peakier. But most of the problem is actually our day-to-day residential use. So we're a very fast-growing district, and our water consumption is one of the highest in the country. So that puts a big cost on us if we try and meet that consumption by upgrading our supply. So taking supply side initiatives, new intakes, new reservoirs, bigger pipes, more pump stations. It's a very expensive way to meet it. So demand management is one of the things that we really need to look at. You can see on the graph there, there's a number of sort of smaller districts and showing their water demand. It's in litres per household per day. So the averages are sitting under 400, but for the Queenstown supplies, they're much higher. And for Queenstown itself, it's very, very high indeed. So yeah, we're using a lot of water. The United Nations tells us we need 20 litres per person per day for functioning. So that's for for drinking, for washing, for basic hygiene, and we're using a lot more than that. We're certainly not drinking all of that. And it's not just the average demand that's the challenge for us. The challenge is that peak demand, because the peak demand is up to 3 times the average demand. So here we've broken it down by scheme. And you've got the annual average demand in the light blue sitting there, and then that 3-day peak demand in the dark blue. So you can see for Lake Hayes, for example, there's that massive 3-day peak demand in the summertime. And that is what's putting the stress, the excessive demand on our infrastructure. We find it very, very difficult to meet those peak demand numbers in some of our schemes. Just having a look here, and this is an updated one from the one you've got in your pack. It's got pretty pictures on it, so you might want to have a look at the screen. So here we're looking at Hawea water demand, and you can see the water demand over time. So you can see the summer peaks and then the low demand in the winter there. And you can also see the wastewater flows at the bottom in red. The difference between the water demand and the wastewater flow is leakage. So there's a high leakage from that network. And then the peak in the summer is outdoor water use. So that's not going down a drain or being flushed down a toilet in the house. That's being used outside of the house. And so you can see how outdoor use is driving those peaks. The other thing to understand about those peak demands is it's not everybody. There are a small number of users, so relatively small number of users in terms of total number in any one scheme, that are using very large amounts of water. So there's a small number of users driving that high peak demand and driving the cost for everybody. So it's quite a difficult thing to manage. So you can see for Hawea, we've got a median use of just over 600 litres per unit per day, which is pretty high on a national level. But then the mean use is 990, and you can see that's skewed towards that top end. So that's demonstrating that most people are down in a reasonable level, reasonable for Queenstown.
And question, how do you know if it's outdoor or indoor use?
That's that difference between the wastewater flow and the water flow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You've got it inside, it's going on.
So if you're using it inside, generally it's going down a drain somewhere.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Unless you're importing a lot of water somewhere else. But in Hawea, the top 9% of households are using over 2,000 litres per unit per day. That's a lot of water. So they are using almost half of the total consumption for Hawea, that top 9%. And that's typical when you look at water use around the country. There's a small number of people driving those very high peak demands.
Can I just point out, we're also not picking on Hawea. Much feel like we are. We've just got some data that allows us to have
Smart meter trial.
Yeah, so I think just to be clear, and anyone who's listening, this is not a pick on Hawea session, but it just helps us, with the information and I guess relate it to yourselves. I don't want it to be feeling like we're
Better than Lake Hayes, it will be far more interesting.
correct. So I just want to
Indeed.
make it very clear. It's not a
Lake Hayes
So
is
is there property type that we can clearly, like a rural residential property, is it relative to the size of a property, for instance, as to how much water they use? So why don't we increase the rate charging on large properties?
because it's not all large properties. So some large properties have a sort of naturalised design where they use native plants, and others have got lawns and roses.
I understand that.
There is a capital value side of the rating for water supply.
I think
to
your point, this is all we need to come up with. Like these are, I guess, us surfacing the problems. And to your point, how do we address it?
I suppose that, I don't want to drag us too far offline, but I'm concerned that I want some assurance that permanent residents of our district aren't going to pay more, because they're naturally going to use more water than people who have holiday houses, right? And so that aren't here very often. So by volumetric charging, by going down the route of measuring and charging by volume, you are penalising the permanent residents of our district.
Can we come back to that? Because that comes to tariff design and structure. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Again, Queenstown's different to most places because of that high number of holiday houses. Yeah.
Just on this though, in terms of peak demand, I mean, clearly this is in the same in Lake Hayes. It's when new subdivisions go in, people build gardens and they want to irrigate the hell out of them to get them growing well. Is there any, is that a spike that then tapers off? Like if you looked at Lake Hayes Estate, for example, now that it's actually really established and doesn't, it all has established gardens, is it using less water now than back in 15 years ago when it was starting up?
No.
Really? Right, so people are still irrigating the hell out of everything that they've got.
Yeah. And sometimes they're just not thinking about it. They've just got systems on all that tons. Yeah. And they might not even be there, as you say. So the peak demand problem isn't just about cost though. One of the problems for us is those very high peak hour, peak day demands following a series of hot, dry days in the summer actually risk our ability to maintain supply. So, we risk pressure collapse, we risk people not having water.
Is that when
at their properties.
everyone turns their sprinklers on?
Everybody, yeah. Everybody's using a lot of water and have used a lot of water. We simply can't pump it fast enough to fill the reservoirs and feed everybody in the network. And those very low pressures in turn risk contamination of the network. So it's a water safety issue as well as a cost issue. And while the water conservation messaging can help, a significant number of people just ignore it or don't take any notice. So yes, set and forget systems are a bit of a problem for us. And our current water supply charging model means there's no incentive to manage your water use either. Right, so in terms of the challenges with those supply side solutions, so traditionally we've taken a supply side solution. We've looked at the demand and we've said, okay, we need a new reservoir here, we need a big pump station there. But that is getting more and more expensive to just add more capacity. And in some of our schemes, we're also running out of water. So there's limited raw water supply available. So that's usually where we've got pools rather than the lakes. The lakes are pretty good. They're big. We can take a lot of water out of those. And it's being emphasised by the Infrastructure Commission, particularly, that we need to look at demand side solutions as well. So that's one of the things, one of the big drivers for this. So demand management.
I'm just drawing parallels with the energy sector here, where one of the key issues is we don't have enough storage batteries. Does council policies align with outdoor usage and storage of water tanks from roof water, or
yeah,
the
the challenge in Queenstown is you won't get enough roof water in the summertime, of course. But yes, there are things that we can do in terms of irrigation at night, for example, which helps in terms of peak use. Doesn't help with overall total use, but it does help in terms of peak use. But one of the issues there, particularly if you're using potable water for irrigation, it's very expensive, that potable water, to get to your boundary. If people are using their own bores for irrigation, then that's fine. Or some of the irrigation intakes. I know some of the larger subdivisions around here have a separate irrigation intake, and they have tanks on their properties and use those for irrigation in the summer. And that's a pretty good model. Using potable water for your cabbages or your lawn, it's a very expensive model.
To your point though, Matt, I mean, if we go down this route and, water is expensive, it may be that people start using their grey water, not their black water, but they could design their home so that their system uses that, and therefore, again, reducing the impact on the wastewater system. So, we need all of our systems across council to start to work together on this, I think.
Agreed.
The planning, yeah.
The reality is, if you pay for water, you'll use it less.
Yeah, or you'll reuse it for something else.
Yeah.
So design your system.
Yeah. This slide just gives an overview of what we've done in terms of the options analysis. So we've looked at 56 possible measures to manage demand, and those are drawn from New Zealand and international best practice. Those have been screened to remove those that weren't suitable for Queenstown Lakes context. Part of that is the holiday homes visitors.
I don't think we have that slide. We don't have that one now. This is an updated version of it.
Okay. Yep, it is an updated one. Yep. Thanks, Brent. Brent wanted this one edited. Just to show how we got where we got to. Then we got to a sort of a short list of 15 measures that went through a multi-criteria analysis, and then we carried those through to some of the scenarios, and there's 4 program scenarios. So yeah, apologies, that is a new slide, and maybe this next one might be as well. Yep, so this one's a new slide as well. So the 4 scenarios, the first one is a basic one. So we use better leak management, we use enforcement of our bylaw. There are a whole lot of council-led measures, so council acts as a good corporate citizen in terms of efficient use of water. And then the second one is the basic plus metering and charging. So that's when you bring in your volumetric charging. And the assumption there in terms of the volumetric charging is a 50-50 tariff model. So 50% is fixed, and that may vary by scheme. And 50% is on how much water you use. And then one of the things that you can do there is you can also vary your tariffs in terms of winter and summer, and look at whether or not you want variable tariff structures. But that'll be something that is recommended to the CCO, because it's not something we'll implement in the next year.
Is the smart metering and stuff smart enough that you look at the peak usage numbers per day, for instance, and that if we're trying to cut the peaks out, actually going, you've used your 600 litres per day, and beyond that, you're hitting the tariff, the chargeable rate. So if it's complicated enough, you can do it each
You can do
day,
stepped tariffs, yes.
or you could do off-peak rates. So you
Yes.
could actually say if you're using it at 7 o'clock at night, you're paying the high rate. If you're doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're within your
They are.
entitlement.
Okay. They are all smart enough to do that, yes.
Because I think, as I said before, I think if you're too blunt with it, you don't get the outcomes. You're penalising the wrong people. It needs to be really targeted to achieving the right things, and it's peak management, time of day, maximum amount per day, all those sorts of things, rather than just across the board.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway,
All those.
I don't know at that one, but I'm super interested in your leakage slide.
All right, we'll come to. So, do we need metering in charging? So, metering enables a whole lot of the demand management initiatives. So, you can't manage what you can't measure. So everybody knows that. So metering gives us an understanding of both network and customer side leakage. Without it, you're guessing where your leaks are. You can go looking for them, but they're not all.
Just one thing on the metering though, is that the suggestion in Wellington recently, and I know that just throwing a number against it, but it was an incredibly high number in order to roll across metering across the district or across the city. Have we done a real cost benefit analysis of whether it pays off?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that has been done and is continuing to be done. So that work is still underway.
Right.
We're lucky in that we've got a lot of meters already, and we've got provision for meters to be dropped in as well, whereas Wellington hasn't got that. So we're a couple of steps ahead of that. And as we've said before, because we're newer, the standardisation of the Tobies and everything is much. We've got a much more modern sort of system.
I'm just conscious that this is obviously a briefing on where this work at. We'll just clarify, but when do we think the work's going to be rounded out, the business case finished?
We've penciled in for July 23rd. Come back to council.
Right.
That's a question.
And yes, that was one of them. And the other one was just let's be really careful of making sure that the Lindavia problem is solved, because the operational cost of cleaning those.
We are not putting any meters in unfiltered lake supplies.
Right.
Yes.
And the filtering has to work.
That's correct.
Just real quickly, because it was one of my questions, how much does it cost for us to put one of these smart meters in? Because we've done them in 3 areas as trials, haven't we? And do we know what the cost is?
Per household. Yeah. I think the problem with those were three kind of different trials here. It's not really haven't we done that sort of consistent. And I think the Glenorchy one was more of an optional one. It was a bit more thorough in the hardware. I don't know what the
so there's
but equally it wasn't funded by ratepayers. Well, theoretically it should be funded by the IAF, but
Kind of sort of with the standard.
Well, my subdivision, a standard meter is $200 per connection on the well, that's the
meter, not the
that's the actual
installation.
meter.
Yeah, it's probably twice as much to install.
Yeah, and it can be installed. What I've been doing, what I'm doing, retrospectively onto the AccuFlow Toby box.
Yes.
I don't know what the machine
There
does.
you go.
Yeah, we can put smart caps on some existing meters. So
The caps aren't any cheaper than a brand new smart meter, but you don't want to throw away the meter in the Toby box. It's in the installation cost goes. So there's a few things to juggle in terms of figuring out what the cost, therefore the cost benefit actually is.
But we'll come back to you with some of those
Must
costs
be
on
is it
the
$1,000 or $2,000 or is it what is the number
Yeah, I'll come back to you from the
yeah,
trials
in
because we've
that
got the
realm.
information.
in that
on the
realm?
trials.
Okay, right. And the And then once again, you've got to assume how long it will be there and what it will achieve in terms of savings. So there's
The ongoing cost is also a major factor with smart meters.
yeah, because you've got you've got a signal cost
Yeah, and you've got
Data cost.
battery.
and batteries.
Batteries.
And
And-
more often you
How do you go and change it back?
Well, and the more that usually don't. But,
can't.
the more the smarter you want to be in terms of the number of measurements you take per hour or per
The more
day,
energy it uses.
the more energy it uses, and then it's it talks to the
You
network.
can't use the flow through the pipe
Too
Many hydro-
One day, John.
One of the things about volumetric charging is that it's been demonstrated across the country and internationally as the most effective demand management tool. I mean, basically, if you charge people, they take notice.
Convince us.
Yeah. And you generally see this 20 to 30% reduction in demand, so it's typical across New Zealand.
The fairest thing. And
Have they done it
you
in-
can charge out.
If they've done it in rich communities that just don't care. Because there will be parts of it, I'm not saying we're a rich community, but there will be parts of our community that just don't care
Yeah.
because they'll pay whatever it takes.
Yeah, so just coming back to this slide, so wood demand and volumetric charging isn't the only thing to roll out. So we also want to better manage excessive water use under our Three Waters bylaw. So our Three Waters bylaw already says that, thou shalt not use excessive water. But we don't really have a good way of enforcing that, and nor do we have a number for what is excessive. So we do want to do some further work in that space, and that comes back to your point.
What we need is to, once it hits a certain number, is that the pressure drops off significantly, so
The
they
alarm
can't,
bells
they,
go off
they,
somewhere.
they sprinkle stuff, just.
Yeah.
We've got a food resilience piece going on as well in this district, and we don't want to discourage people from doing backyard gardening and protecting the resilience that they might otherwise pay for. So all this stuff got to be balanced. I hope we can talk to Bill's team.
Absolutely,
How we-
absolutely. And again, experience around the country shows that use of water for vegetable gardening is not driving these excessive uses. That's the extensive irrigation.
Yeah.
All right. I won't go through the policy and regulatory frameworks because we all understand those are there. But in terms of water services sector practice and the direction of reform, it's worth noting that only 7 councils rely solely on fixed charges or general rates for water. So almost everybody has some form of volumetric charging in place, whether it's a part charge or just an excessive use charge. Only Auckland does 100% volumetric. So they're the only ones that are 100%. So no fixed charge. And from the first litre you use. So yeah, most people have this sort of 50-50 tariff running.
Good.
That's just worth noting. So how do we make the best of our assets? And yes, this is where we come to the leaks. And this loss of water from our network is very inefficient. And here we've got the Lake Hayes example, which has shows our massive leakage, somewhere up around 40%, we think. Although that's quite an uncertain figure because we don't have a lot of meters in that network and we don't have 100% customer metering either. So that's one of the first ones where we want to put more bulk flow meters in place and more customer meters in place so we understand how much water we're using, where it's going, and what is leaking. So it is a very high priority for us.
Being one of the more modern developed areas though, why is there more leakage there than anywhere else?
That's the answer we don't know. So we want to go and put a whole lot more metering in. So there may be connections there that we haven't even got noted in our network, and we haven't got any meters on. We don't know. So we're going to have a look at that.
It's a crazy number in Lake Hayes.
Crazy number of locations.
I mean, it's interesting.
Arrowtown's not much better.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
But I
Arrowtown
mean,
being
it's interestingly, Wanaka and Luggett and Howie are actually relatively low. And Howie has always been one where they've signalled as being bad for leakage, but it's obviously not that bad.
It's improved a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's quite a lot of work being done in Howie.
Glenorchy's pretty bad too.
See all people there.
Is that old data because our tanks were leaking?
But that Lake Hayes one is an extraordinary number. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like there's a river flowing out somewhere.
That's right.
It's like
And Lake Hayes, we're about to renew the bore water consent. So we need to get this, we need to get better understanding.
No, but this is Lake Hayes, not Lake Hayes itself only, not Lake Hayes Estate.
Yeah, Lake
It
Hayes.
was
Lake Hayes itself.
just Lake Hayes around like the more kind of.
Oh, right, so the ones across the,
Yeah, not Lake Hayes. Lake Hayes
That's why
Estate.
the irrigation.
Yeah.
so what's that been distinguished? I mean, that's a pretty small scheme. in
It's a small
theory,
scheme, but it's,
and it's leaking water.
yeah, and it's exceeding its consent, during peak
The lake
summer.
might dry out if you turn the leaks on. publicly.
One of the things that we want to focus on, particularly over the next 12 months, is improving our network performance and improving our understanding of our network performance. So getting these district metered areas established and having enough of them, having bulk meters so we know how much water is going into those distinct areas, and we can run overnight tests and understand what our leakage. So we assume at 3 a.m. that everything that's running through those meters is leaking, basically. So there'll be a little bit of household use.
Our washing machine runs at 300.
We'll note your house. But yeah, there's a little bit of use overnight, but most of it will be leakage. So we want to improve our DMAs across the district and improve our metering, and then look at, particularly in that case in Arrowtown, look at some customer metering as well. That'll be underway over the next 12 months. And that's project to improve leak management is one of the key projects under the program business case.
You can't run metering without improving the management.
Indeed.
It's not
Indeed.
acceptable.
Okay, so any more discussion on the leakage? No, we'll move to how do we lead by example? So this is about what the council itself is doing. And one of the things we want to do is lead by example, because we do understand that, community pushback is a bit of a risk for us here. So there may be some public resistance to metering and volumetric charging and even water restrictions. So we want to roll out more education so people understand, particularly those sort of those statistics about the top 10% of people using almost half the water, so that people understand that what we're wanting to target here is excessive use, particularly, and ordinary use is just fine.
But well, some of the bills should go down, right? Like if we did it right,
Most bills will go down
most bills
if we
should
do
go
it right.
down. So I mean, there's no way that's.
But people don't always understand that. So there's a lot of pushback around the country against metering initially, but then generally people get to a better understanding of it.
Quick question. So you said that once you install metering, volumetric charging, water use goes down by 30%.
20 to 30% usually.
And that would feed directly into the amount of water that's going in the shot of a wastewater treatment plant?
No, because it's outdoor water use. It's not going down the drains. Most of that water is being used outside. So you'll get a very small change to your shot over wastewater treatment plant, but it'll be very
Interesting
small.
question. I mean, it's like where you're going with that, but if you mandated that you had low flush toilets and shower heads and stuff, would you reduce the demand to project shot over to a meaningful point that you would reduce the discharge needs? And I think that's probably where you're going.
Probably not for a very long time, because most of what we're targeting is that outdoor use and that excessive use. So
it's a separate issue, I think, is that we're talking about, how much. And the question is if you effectively concentrate the sewage going into Project Shot Over, does it impact on the treatment cycle and all that sort of stuff, and reduce the amount coming out, the water coming out the other end? I don't know the answer to any of that, but I don't think it's as straightforward as that. I think there is a case that if you can reduce
Showers.
wastewater by reducing demand through those sort of means, and there's they do it for showers.
You can reduce the volume very slightly,
Just one other
but
question.
the nutrient load will be the same.
Yeah, that's what was my
Yes,
point,
yeah.
yeah.
What's
It's
the,
the-
what's
Yeah.
the, I'm sure it's all over the place, so I'm asking for a stupid average, but what's the ratio between outdoor use and indoor use? For, I don't know, for a semi-rural property?
So in the summertime, probably 4 or 5 times their indoor use.
The 4 or 5 times, right, but the ratio between, on a hot day, between the stuff that's used outside and the stuff that's used in the house that goes for the shuttle wastewater treatment.
There was a chart earlier that represented that really well.
And for those large households, it's even those large users, the very high users, it's even higher. They're using a massive amount. So that's an average.
Yeah, that demonstrates it quite well, I thought.
It does demonstrate it really well. Yeah. All right. So the remaining projects around this are council measures. So this is council's irrigation efficiency and also council facility water uses so that our operational use is sufficient as it can be. Big education program, residential outdoor water efficiency program to get the garden centres on board. And then there's a regulatory and policy project. So that's looking at our 3 water supply law and update that so that we can effectively target this excessive use of water. And then the pipe links, repairs, remission policies in the future. Just quickly on the transition, because I can see people are itching to ask me questions. So responsibility for water services transfers from council to the water services CCO in July. So from that date, responsibility for this program also transfers across, except that bylaw. So bylaws remain with councils. The CCOs don't have bylaw making powers yet. See what happens as things go on in the future. So council action and decisions will be to approve the business case in July. It should be complete and ready to come through in July. We will implement that increased leak detection and repair program with our enhanced DMAs, and that is in the LTP. So that money's already sitting there in the budget. Review and update that bylaw. And yeah, just noting this 5 million for water demand management in the annual plan. So that's 26-27. Then the CCO, they will need to develop that detailed business case for universal customer metering. So that's talking about the cost benefit and, as you say, Te Ake Wai have been looking at this in Wellington. They will have to approve whatever decision there is on the types of metering and whether or not they're the same across the district or whether bespoke solutions are needed. Mountainous terrain, communication's not easy in some places, so they may need that. And the recommendation is to roll out that universal metering over a 5-year period. So it's not all at once, but over a 5-year period, and starting in those schemes where we already had challenges in terms of supply or excessive use or both. And noting that there's 52 million in the water demand management plan in the existing LTP and the water services delivery plan. So that's already sitting there.
Is it possible to just to have a quick run over of the district plan at the same time as we're doing this, is to make sure the ability to put tanks on sections is
so at the moment, if to get water tanks on sections under your district plan, you have to pass sort of cost benefit analysis section. We had a look at it in Christchurch and we couldn't pass that. So we couldn't get those provisions in the district plan in terms of making people put tanks on, making it easier to put tanks on.
making it easier, just so people choose to.
That's probably building code, is it, rather than district plan?
Depends in terms of whether there's physical structure within the section, adjacent to boundaries. And
Yeah, we need to make,
otherwise it's a,
I think we need to put conditions on it and make it permitted subject to.
There are a lot of slimline solutions
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there are even fencing solutions now. So fence is slightly fatter, but it's actually a
I
water.
was going to say, it's interesting, the example in Sydney is interesting because tanks used to be effectively banned because of the public health risks, but then once the bushfire and the drought cycles came in and the water supply became constrained, they're now, heavily encouraged, and those streamlined ones that fit under people's eaves and things are really, and it just developed a whole bunch of new technology that people.
go into a Bunnings in Australia now.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, that's right.
huge
They've got the first flush systems as well that
letters.
is a big deal because the first wash off the roof just goes down the drain and then it
So there's
cycles
some
in.
very smart systems around there.
Could we do that though? Because I think it's important, it's like supplying the bus before you put toll charges in. You know, you've got to give people alternatives if they're users. So I've mentioned it lots of times, but we never really get to the point, can we please do that with the planning team and make sure that
We have a
it's.
two responsibility.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm done. We did a race through there, so is there time for questions,
6 minutes.
more discussion?
One question, that's just going back to where we were with Oliver and how we're trying to set the rates this year. And talking about renewals maybe being driven by growth. So, you know, as growth happens, then maybe there's an opportunity to do a renewal. How do we avoid us getting ourselves confused again, or sort of what's the level of service, or is a renewal, is that charged back as a just maintain the level of service, or is it just something we're doing because we've got the opportunity to do it because there's some growth happening and who's paying for it? But I think that was some of the stuff that we struggled with this time around with rates, and I'm not sure where that
I think
calculation goes.
the cost up is obviously driven over the finance team, right? So it's probably, I know you guys have had some conversations around that. Like, we obviously contribute, you know, the information and facts that we have, but then it's sort of all processed through council and I guess without the finance folks here to probably answer, I'm sort of reluctant to sort of explain how it's all calculated. It's probably more than that.
So I guess it's really, you just sort of, you'll be waiting for an opportunity. Well, we know at some point we'll need to do something here. And now there's an opportunity because we're going to have to do something because of the growth. That effectively how it works.
So in terms of the renewal and opportunity stuff I was talking about earlier, most of it would actually be, there's a renewal that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity to upsize it to service growth, and then you split the funding between growth and renewal. That would be the more likely scenario. Occasionally, if you are digging alongside a pipe, you might be forced to renew something that may not be at the end of its ideal life, but you don't want to come back and establish crews on site and trench again and blah blah blah. So those decisions, but the more likely one that we would identify through our work anyway would be the opportunity to upsize something and not have it as a pure renewal. Upsize to allow a bit of extra capacity, knowing that we need a bit more in a certain place at a certain time. So it'd be more that way for in terms of the role.
I mean, as I sort of indicated, I mean, I would need some convincing to sign off on water metering, smart metering across the district today. In terms of, and I know that we're still working through that case, but I want to see that the cost and the benefit, because it's not linear. The amount we pay for every litre of water is not linear. It drops off significantly at the top because the infrastructure is the primary cost. The operational cost of whether we pump 1,000 or 2,000 litres per property is not proportional. And as I said, that the really understanding that we're going to charge the right people and achieve the right outcomes is something I'm yet to be convinced of.
Starting with the schemes that are maybe, at capacity.
Well, totally, but we have to build the mechanism to charge. That even going down that road is the start of a long road. We want to be consistent across the district. To your point, we want to understand what is level of service. What is the level of service we're trying to achieve? Because at the moment, I don't think that is clear, because we've got a whole bunch of variation around how much water we supply, what the quality of that water is, what the those sort of things, because that's your benchmark is then determining what is maintaining level of service versus what's providing for growth. Because at the moment, we've provided more water per capita in Luggett, but we haven't, but they weren't really getting, they were getting a lot of water restrictions and stuff previously. So it's like, well, is that a level of service increase because they're now getting more water? Going to have less water restrictions? I don't know the answer to that because they're already using too much water in the first place. So I don't. Those sort of things we need to be really clear on, and so we need to draw a really clear line in the stand and saying what is level of service for our district, and all those other things around. I'm encouraged by the fact that the potential to be way more sophisticated in our charging model is there through the smart meters, and I think that's critical because I don't think you can say, every dollar, every litre you use, as you said in Auckland or whatever, is charged, or even every litre above 500 litres is charged, because I don't think it's way more nuanced than that. And the size of the property, the time of day, all these other things have to play a factor as well.
I think some of these things are obviously going to fall off into the CCO anyway. But and you raised a good point last year, I think, meeting where that Water Services Act, I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a little bit of grey area there as to how much water the entities are going to be required to provide properties.
Well, what's drinking water? Because at the moment, as I said, I don't think. I think if you read it strictly speaking, I don't think the entity is required to provide the best irrigation water.
No, it's certainly not. So the definition of drinking water is quite clear.
So
household use.
So what's going to happen to everyone's demand for drinking for irrigation water? If it's no longer it's not mandated to the Water Services CCO, then what happens to it? They don't provide they just stop it at 500 litres.
We set a statement of expectations.
So it's not even within their mandate. Why would they do something that's not? Why would they do something in our statement of in their statement of expectation that's not even within their mandate? They have a legal mandate to provide drinking water, not irrigation.
Probably, but
It is going to be outside of
confused
Yeah.
because there is no way of distinguishing between irrigation water and drinking water. That's what's used.
The Act's definition
Exactly,
is the Act's definition.
I think what Quentin said though is that if the Act only provides for drinking water and
They're
there's
going
an
to
allowance for drinking water per person or per household, and they only provide that much, and there's
they're going to
no need
complete.
for
They can undersupply,
There's
still
your
meet their
100 litres.
mandate, and fail to meet everybody's expectations across the entire district.
It's a hypothetical.
It's not. It's a completely legitimate question.
So,
And no one can answer it.
Yeah, so one of the tariff structures, and you touched on it yourself, one of the tariff structures that's quite common around the country is there's a 50% fixed charge, and there's various ways of setting that fixed charge, and 50% is volumetric. But some of them also have a fundamental allowance in there, so maybe 500 litres per household, and then they only charge above that. So that's a sort of reasonable use amount, if you like, and then you can have block tariffs. So if people are using 1,000 litres, there's a certain tariff. If they're using another 500 litres a day on top of that, the tariff ramps up again. So yeah, there are options.
But as I said, I think those things are really important. The detail, devil's in the detail.
Particularly for the Queenstown
It's a pretty blunt.
context.
It's not,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
I'm still thinking how you go the other way. How do you charge the houses in Arrowtown that are kept empty and owned by Aucklanders? How do you charge them more for water than the people who actually live in our community and contribute to the community? How do they pay less?
Yeah, well, I agree. I totally agree.
Because they're not using it, but
And
they're taking a house out of the market for use, and they're the people who should be paying.
Interestingly, we when we did the rubbish collection years ago, so it wasn't that long ago, we had blue bags on the side of the road, which is a user pay scheme. You paid to pick up when you bought the blue bag. And even within my time, we introduced the bins to every household, and that reduced the cost per household because we're charging the people who don't use it. Even if they don't put their bins out on the street, it doesn't matter. They're still paying exactly the same amount.
We are at our time limit. Any other really quick questions before we finish off? But otherwise, thank you very much.
I'd just like to say that I know you haven't got through all the slides, but I thought they were really, really good.
Yeah, really good. Okay, great. Yes, go back to. Thanks for the discussion and the questions. Very valuable. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Just one thing, we talked about the CCO before. Just want to flag it. We've been talking to Mads about all the strategic stuff we're doing, the water environment stuff. So they're very much already aware of what we're doing in light of some of these decisions are significant ones, will be decisions that you're going to have to pick up or be involved in, some 12 months and beyond. So just want to reassure everyone that we're having those conversations already.
So we said to me as she's talking to me,
Yeah, well, yeah, correct. So we've obviously Julian's still relatively new, but we've got a session coming out with him too, where we're going to get a very similar spiel to this.
You also see in terms of presentation, sort of trying to include everything, the split between ourselves and the C7 group there around that where that sits. So it's good understanding of that split. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
One o'clock or 1:30?
I'm on the calendar.
Is that-